Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fresh, your host. I'll be with you for the next hour. You're listening to LibertyRadioLive.com. Good morning to my friends in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, Detroit Lakes, Michigan, Inkster, Michigan, Gilman, Iowa, Peoria, Illinois, Newburgh, Indiana, Gainesville, Florida, Sebastian, Florida, and San Benito, Texas, and even way down in Kingston, St. Andrew. Good morning to all my listeners this morning. We're continuing our reading and discussion of the book, The Vatican Billions by Avro Manhattan. This is the book about the Church of Antichrist, the antithesis of the Church of Christ. Our Christ, who had not even a pillow upon which to lay his head, his antithesis in the world is the most financially astute organization on the planet, the amasser of wealth par excellence, land, gold, stocks and bonds, real estate, vice. That's right, vice. The trafficking of human flesh, drugs, weapons, involved in bank scandals, priest pedophilia, and on and on and on. The killer of God's people. For nearly 2,000 years, the killer of God's people, the Roman Catholic Church. Now, the last time we were on the air before the long weekend, we were enumerating some of the many tax-free businesses that the Roman Catholic Church is involved in. We'll continue with the enumeration of those businesses this morning. The author, Avro Manhattan, writes that the Roman Catholic Church should be involved in the wholesale of alcohol is not exceptional. And I'll just add, you know, that the Roman Catholic Church would have a vested interest in wine production, don't you? I mean, after all, the Roman Catholic priest should be drinking Roman Catholic wine during the Mass, don't you know? It says several of her religious orders are doing just that. The Christian Brothers, for instance, advertise the largest selling brandy in the United States. The Carthusian order of monks produces and sells chartreuse, which is a kind of super liqueur. American monks and nuns are busily engaged upon making profits. The Trappist monks of St. Joseph's Abbey, Massachusetts, for instance, manufacture 27 flavors of jelly on their 2,300-acre farm. The monks of Our Lady of Gethsemane Abbey, Bardstown, Kentucky, run a prosperous business in cheese, cakes, hams, bacon, and sausage. The Abbey of St. Benedict, Aspen, Colorado, have 500 head of cattle, herded by cowboy monks in their 2,800-acre ranch. The Cistercian monks have a dairy and beef business near Dubuque, Iowa. They have 2,000 acres and large herds of dairy and beef cattle. They operate also a sawmill, a stone quarry, and other business. The Daughters of St. Paul have a profitable printing business. The Marist Fathers have a recording business in Hawaii. Religious orders owned or still own, directly or vicariously, department stores in St. Louis, Camden, St. Louis, Missouri, Camden, New Jersey, and in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In Hartford, Connecticut, they bought the Bond and Vendome Hotel. In Columbus, Ohio, the Montgomery Ward Building. In Newport, Rhode Island, the Strand Theater. In New Haven, Connecticut, the New Haven Railway Headquarters Building and the Sheraton Hotel. In Detroit, Michigan, the Crucible Steel Company's warehouse. In Chicago, Illinois, the Brunswick Bulk Colander buildings. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, the $1.9 million steel tube mill of Bridgeport Brass Company. Now, let me ask you something. You having trouble finding a job in this country? Well, I would certainly stand to reason that we might be finding it difficult to find jobs in this country when the Roman Catholic Church is in business. It touts itself as a charitable institution, but it's in business. Big business. It says the wealth of one of these orders, the Marianists, is illuminating. On one occasion, having decided to float a bond issue, they sent out a prospectus indicating that the society had assets of more than $515 million, from which it had derived a net income tax-free of $669,000 a year. Now remember, you have to keep reminding yourself that this book was published in 1982 or 3, and it's citing figures from the 1960s. 1960s. Over a generation ago. What do you suppose these numbers represent today? There are hundreds of similar religious orders, Roman Catholic religious orders, running prosperous businesses and yet paying not 1 red cent of tax money on the ground that they are a religious institution. Some of them, although only partially religious, or rather more lay than religious, are financial giants in their own right. One of these is the Knights of Columbus. That's right, a financial giant. The Knights of Columbus have assets exceeding $200 million. Their portfolio includes $55.5 million in securities, several million in Canadian government bonds, $4.8 million in railroad issues, $18 million in utility stocks and bonds, $12 million in industrial securities, and United States government bonds. It owns such properties as the Yankee Stadium of New York City, the former New York Haven Railroad headquarters building, Crucible Steel Company's Detroit warehouse, Brunswick Bulk Colander Company building in Chicago, the site of a new $5 million Sheraton Hotel in New Haven, department stores in St. Louis, the property value of which is $4.5 million. That in Camden, New Jersey is $2.5 million, and the one in Philadelphia is $2 million. A new $1.8 million steel tube mill of Bridgeport Brass Company, and others. They run a vast insurance business. In 1966, they reported assets, hold on to your hats, $281.2 million. Now these have exceeded $300 million, according to this author back in 1983, the publishing of this book. Isn't it interesting to note that they own Yankee Stadium? Isn't that where Pope Benedict said his Mass during his visit in 2008? That's right, they own the place. The most important order, the most important religious order of the Roman Catholic Church, it says, however, is a true religious order in terms of importance and of influence, and this is of the Jesuit order. The Society of Jesus is paramount in the education and in financial fields. It operates 28 Roman Catholic universities, 28 Jesuit universities in this country. Some of these, like that of Fordham in New York City and the St. Louis University, get this, they get enormous subsidies from the federal government, notwithstanding the fact that the orders engage directly or vicariously in very profitable businesses. Now, this is what I call government-sponsored religion. It can be perceived in no other way. The federal government sponsoring these Jesuit universities. It says their financial transactions and links crisscross the American fabric. In San Francisco, for instance, decades ago, they financed a Sicilian DiGiorgio in the expansion of his fruit business. Today, the order has control of the structure. DiGiorgio Fruit Company operates in California, Florida, and Central America and runs its own steamship fleet. That's right. A church. It says, even more telling is the fact that 50 years ago, they furnished A.P. Gianni. Now, this is huge. Listen to this. Even more telling is the fact that 50 years ago, they furnished A.P. Giannini, an Italian promoter, with half of the starting capital of the Bank of America. Today, at least according to this author during the time of the writing of this book, today the Jesuits still own 51% of the stock of Bank of America. According to a reliable source, quote, the Jesuits are one of the largest stockholders in American Steel Company, Republic and National. They are also among the most important owners of 4 greatest aircraft manufacturing companies in the United States, Boeing, Lockheed, Douglas, and Curtiss-Wright. That's right, they make money building warplanes in this country. The Roman Catholic Church has controlling interest of aircraft companies that provide weaponry for the United States military. Now, do you see why I call the wars of the United States papal proxy wars? Examine them carefully and you'll find out who they most benefit. Not the United States. The Roman Catholic Church's standing in the world. That's why I call them papal proxy wars. He continues, he says, furthermore, they have a controlling interest in the Phillips Oil Company and in the Creole Petroleum Company, which has a great many oil concessions in Venezuela, Roman Catholic Venezuela. The Jesuits also own large interests in television and radio. You ever wonder why there is so much filth on the television? And why there's so much misinformation and outright lies in the mainstream television and radio medias? The Roman Catholic Church owns it. And the Roman Catholic Church, through their controlled media, make sure that the American people remain ignorant about the realities that we're discussing in this book. Continuing now, the Jesuit order is perhaps the wealthiest of all the religious concerns in the United States, with an unofficial income of between $250 and $280 million a year. Again, the Jesuit order does not pay 1 red cent of tax. As a matter of fact, the Jesuit order doesn't even pay the judgments that are levied against them in court cases brought to bear by Tamaki Law Firm of Washington for the 450 cases of pedophile priests, the destruction of children, 450 of them in the Northwest Jesuit province. They were adjudicated $166.1 million award for these 450 kids. What did the Jesuit order do? The richest of all the religious orders of the Roman Catholic Church, they declared bankruptcy, and the court allowed it. According to Roman Catholic teaching, it is not possible that the civil law could bring a case against a Roman Catholic priest. I reiterate what we said earlier in the book.
I'm just interrupting here for a short moment because what Tom speaks here about, he had an interview with Ken Birdchief that I uploaded on my English-only YouTube channel. I'm trying to see if I can find that here on the list. Anyway, I will provide to you the links of this, or the link of this, in the in the description of the video. Inquisition update: Ken Birdchief, sexual holocaust on Native Americans. And this Ken Burchief was an advocate, an indigenous American citizen, quote-unquote Indian, as you call them. And he gave an interview with Tom Friess in 2 parts, of which there's only 1 part in First Amendment Radio's archives, and that I put into a video. And there he speaks intensively about this stuff, because Ken Burchief was the one defending the children that were molested, misused, abused by the Jesuit priests in there, and he speaks extensively about that in this broadcast. So if you want to know more about what Tom speaks here about, watch that, and the link will be provided in the description box of this video.
Brought out by R.W. Thompson in his book, The Papacy and the Civil Power. The laity have as much right to bring a charge against a Roman Catholic priest as a slave has to bring a charge against his slave owner. And that's why this judgment will never be paid by the Jesuit order. And 450 Aboriginal and Native American children will continue to suffer. Continuing the book, it says, it must be remembered that there are hundreds of such orders in the Roman Catholic Church. Contrary to general belief, they are as numerous as in Europe. In the United States, in fact, there are 125 orders of monks and nuns. 125 orders of monks and 414 orders of nuns, for a total of 539 operating all over the United States. Unlike their European counterparts, they're financially minded. A few random examples of the assets of some of the women's orders would prove the correctness of the statement. The assets of the Grey Nuns, now I'm going to round off these figures just to make them easier to contemplate. The assets of the Grey Nuns of Charity are $3.5 million. Those of the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of California total $7.5 million. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Newark, $17.9 million. The Little Sisters of the Poor, $25 million. The Sisters of Mercy, $40 million. The Sisters of Charity, $66.5 million. The Sisters of Charity of Providence, $90 million. The Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother, $94 million. The Sisters of the Holy Cross, $111 million. And it says Martin Larson and Stanley Lowell, in their book Praise the Lord for Tax Exemption, gave a list of 23 women's orders and their assets. The total is an astronomical one, $706 million, an average of $30.7 million for each order. Quote, extrapolating on this basis, they conclude the assets of the 414 women's orders would be a grand total of $12.7 billion with a B dollars, unquote. One of these, the Little Sisters of the Poor, with 3 provinces in the United States and a hospital in almost every diocese, have wealth totaling at least $1 billion. Then there are the religious orders of men. On the basis of $90 million average, the same writers have reckoned that the 125 men's orders would show a grand total wealth of $11.2 billion. In this manner, the grand total for just the religious orders of the Roman Catholic Church in the United States, just the religious orders, would be $23 billion. And I remind you, once again, these figures were taken from the 60s. As a matter of fact, the present writer believes this to be grossly minimized because many assets which are on the borderline of legal ownership have not been taken into account. We have quoted the assets of the religious orders, since these are supposed to be the quote-unquote poor, although their quote-unquote poverty amounts to about $24 billion. What are the total assets of the Roman Catholic Church were one to scrutinize property, investments, industrial shares, and the like? An idea can be given if one quotes the value of the Roman Catholic churches and rectories alone. Back in 1936, their value was $891.5 million. 40 years later, it had multiplied beyond recognition. Now remember, we're nearly 60 years beyond this period. It says as of 1968, remember these are 1960s figures, as of 1968, the wealth of the Roman Catholic Church, wealth limited to purely religious function, it must be stated, exceeded $54 billion. This is only the portion of the Roman Catholic financial iceberg which is visible above the water, since its commercial operations in the United States are so vast and so well concealed from the public that it is almost impossible to ferret them out. Recently, for instance, a Washington, D.C. luxury housing project valued at $75 million was announced by Societe Generale Immobiliare of Rome, which, as we've seen, is a subsidiary of the Vatican. But not a single newspaper mentioned the fact. Why wouldn't the newspapers or the radio or the television media be interested in reporting these facts? Simply because they're controlled by the Roman Catholic Church. And it says, if to them one adds the properties owned by the thousands of Catholic parishes throughout the United States, the result is truly staggering, though the amounts have never been disclosed. Yet a summary but fairly accurate figure can be reached by consulting declarations at the tax office. Even so, such declarations should never be taken at their face value, since the assessment of such property is usually far below actual or market value. One typical case should suffice to prove this. In Buffalo, New York, tax assessors rated the tax-exempt Roman Catholic Church, school, college, and hospital land and building at $51 million. But the Roman Catholic Church's hierarchy's own private released figures gave the total church assets there, mainly real estate and buildings, as $236 million. The Research Department of American United, in a study of District of Columbia Tax Office figures, learned that although the Roman Catholic Church claims but 19% of the total of the nation's capital, it owns 38% of the dollar value of all religious tax-exempt property and 50% of the physical land area so exempted. The church's elementary and high schools in the District of Columbia cover 61.8 acres with assessed value of $6.5 million. Colleges and universities cover 265.5 acres with an assessed value of $24.5 million. The total acreage in these categories, 333.6, bears interesting comparison with the Vatican's mere 108.7 acres. The total assessed value of all Roman Catholic tax-exempt property in the District of Columbia alone was $87.6 million in the above categories. This did not include investment properties held by church agencies or by the Vatican itself. Yes, that's right, the Vatican itself owns property in this country. Let me just clarify something. The Pope is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, according to the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. And we've already proven that they regard the donation of Constantine and the Pseudo-Isidorian decretals as their authorization to own everything in heaven and the earth and the underworld. Anything owned by the Roman Catholic Church is certainly owned by the papacy. Now back to business. Dirty business. A criminal enterprise. The Roman Catholic Church. If you were listening to Liberty Radio Live prior to the beginning of Inquisition Update this morning, you heard George Gordon talk very eloquently about criminal enterprise. This, the Roman Catholic Church, is a criminal enterprise, and she's in bed with our government. She is supported by yours and my tax dollars to the tune of millions and millions and millions of dollars. And the Roman Catholic Church invests those millions and millions and millions of dollars into money-making commercial enterprises that pay no taxes, that take businesses that could be run by God's people, yet they are run by foreign concern, a hostile foreign concern, the Vatican, which prospers from business out of this country, robbing you and I of legitimate business and robbing the United States of the taxes that would come to help support the country. And you and I picked up the tax slack. You talk about robbery, and you'll find nobody in the mainstream media or the alternative media to describe these situations to you. Continuing now where we left off, it says the total assessed value of all Roman Catholic tax-exempt property in the District of Columbia alone was $87.6 million in the above categories. This did not include investment properties held by church agencies. That's right, the Roman Catholic Church has agencies that handle her investments to cloak who really owns them. That's why the American people are oblivious to how much stock and securities the Roman Catholic Church owns, because they're held by agencies that are serving the Vatican. And also the properties that are owned by the Vatican itself. It says, then in addition, there is the district's foreign government tax-exempt list, which includes the Washington headquarters of the Pope's Apostolic Delegate, a plush establishment on Massachusetts Avenue covering 2 acres and bearing a tag of $550 million. A further interesting disclosure was the fact that the Roman Catholic Church in Washington, D.C. invests less of its money, only 18%, in charitable programs than it does in any other category. Yes, the Church of Charity, the Roman Catholic Church, invests only 18% in charitable organizations. You want to know where your money goes when you give it to a Roman Catholic charity? Straight into the Vatican coffers. Only 18% of it is used for charity. And how much of that would be administrative cost? Yet we had 3 presidents not long ago standing on the White House lawn begging and pleading for American citizens to help out earthquake-devastated Haiti by supporting Roman Catholic charities. Continuing with the book, it says, the May 1961 Church and State, apparently a publication, estimated on the basis of the Buffalo Diocese that the total of directly owned tax-exempt property of the Roman Catholic Church in the United States is about $11 billion. Now remember, these are old figures. What these figures could be today, only your imagination would suffice. It says, an estimate is based on simple arithmetic. A financial credit rating for the Buffalo Diocese has put the church's assets in this one diocese at $236 million. Its average gross income is $24.5 million. Taking the Buffalo membership of 860,000 in ratio with the claimed total American membership of 40 million, a total national wealth close to $11 billion is indicated. This, however, is an understatement. Those reliable investigators, Lowell and Larson, have tentatively given a conservative estimate of the Roman Catholic Church's wealth in the United States. In a careful tabulation of their assets, they have come to a grand total of colossal proportions. Between these, they have singled out annual voluntary contributions of $5 billion, active business income $1.2 billion, $1.2 billion, stocks, bonds, real estate $13 billion, commercial business property $12 billion, religiously used real estate $54.3 billion. With sundry other assets which they mention, the grand total is $80,177,600,000. The present writer, Avro Manhattan, however, reckons that they have underestimated the total value, since a vast amount of financial, commercial, and religious activities cannot be assessed within any conventional framework, owing to their intangibility and therefore escape detection. Such elusive and yet concrete wealth should be taken into account, and it surely would not be underestimating its true value were we to add another $20 billion to the already $80 billion mentioned above. So what does that make it? $100 billion in 1960s money. We shall mention 2 or 3 cases to prove the validity of the concreteness of these invisible billions. The Catholic Church, for instance, systematically solicits wills. Catholic organizations are in the habit of contacting lawyers with a reminder that a good Catholic should put his church in his will for at least 10% of the corpus. The harvest is never fully disclosed, but it is reckoned to run into the hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Although bingo is legal in only 11 states, the Roman Catholic Church makes profit in all 50. M. Larson and S. Lowell, who we've mentioned above, this investigative firm, have reckoned that since many parishes net $50,000 a year from bingo, quote, if this should be the average, the total would be about $1 billion a year, unquote. This is their factual assessment of scrutinizing concrete figures of profits netted by the Catholic parishes. Another invisible asset is tax exemption. The 2 investigators quoted above have reckoned that Catholic miscellaneous properties used for religious purposes and exempt from taxation are now worth in excess of $60 billion. That's $60 billion taken off the tax rolls. But the most astounding feature of all such wealth is that the Catholic Church receives additional wealth as a free gift from the government itself. For example, out of the $125 million of public tax funds going to church-related hospitals only a while ago, the Roman Catholic Church received the lion's share of that amount, no less than $112 million. The anomaly of the situation is made even more absurd as we have already mentioned, by the fact that the Roman Catholic Church, while receiving so many millions of dollars from taxes paid by the ordinary U.S. citizen, most of which are Protestant, does not pay any tax herself on her colossal properties or income. The latter is between $12 and $13 billion a year, calculated in 1970 figures. In fact, out of a grand total of all the churches in the United States, including the Jewish, of $141.8 billion, well over 50% is owned by one church alone, the Catholic Church. The Jewish Church represents $7.5 billion, Protestant wealth about $54.1 billion, and Catholic wealth $80.2 billion. No taxes have ever been collected, and no accounting has ever been asked upon such immense wealth. As we've already said, all religious organizations are exempt from taxes, federal, state, and local. They pay no real estate tax, no inheritance tax, no income tax, no sales tax, no gift tax, no employment tax, no Social Security tax. All income, even from a business which is church-owned, is exempt from taxes. Thus, the hundreds of businesses owned and operated by the various religious orders of monks and nuns, or by the sundry dioceses and archdioceses all over the United States, or even by affiliated companies or feeders, do not pay the 52% corporate tax which any other business are forced to pay by the device of holding title as a church, or a church convention, or a church association. Furthermore, they are exempt from making any report, from disclosing their budgets, their profits, or any other financial transaction, no matter what their economic activities may be. And this includes, I will add, the Federal Reserve Bank. It has never been audited. It will never be audited. Why? Because it is owned by the Jesuit order and run through their Rothschild agents, the guardians of the Vatican treasury. You hear all sorts of talk by politicians seeking to be elected to the federal government. I'm going to name one of them, Ron Paul, talks about the Federal Reserve Bank, tells that it ought to be audited, but he will never tell you why the Federal Reserve Bank has never been audited, and neither will it be audited during his presidential administration, because the Roman Catholic Church owns the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, the civil power has no power to audit a divine bank. That's why the Federal Reserve Bank is never going to be audited. It's run by the Jesuit order. It's run by the Rothschild agents who are subservient to the Jesuit order. They are the guardians of the Vatican treasury. They don't have to disclose what they do. This country is in debt to the tune of some $27 trillion to the Federal Reserve Bank, to the Vatican. That's who holds the debt of this country. And a debtor is a slave to his creditor. That's a biblical maxim. You can't get around it. This Federal Reserve Bank, this Jesuit bank, this Vatican bank called the Federal Reserve Bank has you and me in debt to the tune of $27 trillion. And if we don't pay, if they choose to foreclose, then they can assess all the profit. They can confiscate all the land of this country. Its gold, its natural resources, its human resources, and every other kind of resources, and use it to pay the debt. And if they choose, they can sell this debt as they have to the Chinese, whom they are now building economically, industrially, and militarily. You don't suppose that the Vatican is going to use China to repossess the United States of America, do you? Well, I'll tell you, that's exactly what I think they're going to do. Do you think the Vatican's going to write off $27 trillion owed to it by the United States of America? Not on your life. We are going to be a slave, or we are going to be dead. That's the reality. And that's why this program is called Inquisition Update. Now, continuing with the book, it says they are exempt from tax on interest dividends, real estate, royalties, rentals, and capital gains. By June of 1965, the Catholic Church had accumulated a minimum of $80 billion in real estate of the total $325 billion worth of privately owned real estate in the United States. And it is 25% of all privately owned land. That is 25% of all privately owned land. Of this, 56% is held in trust for the Vatican. By 1972, the combined assets of the United States' 5 largest industrial corporations totaled about $46.9 billion. Those of the Catholic Church between 80 and 100 billion. Who's the biggest money maker in the United States of America? Who owns most of the land, real estate, stocks, bonds, corporations? Who is the biggest financial giant in the United States of America? It's the Roman Catholic Church. And it says, in virtue of this, the Roman Catholic Church, therefore, has become the mightiest corporation of the United States, a colossus before which the wealth of even the most powerful American concerns shrink into insignificance. Thus, within one single generation, the Roman Catholic Church has contrived to transform herself into the wealthiest giant theocracy of the Western Hemisphere, if not the entire world. And they insist. When I talk to people about the Roman Catholic Church in private discussions and on amateur radio, they tell me, Tom, it just can't be true what you're saying about the Roman Catholic Church. It's desperately poor. They're always begging for money. They can't possibly control this country. But they do, in spades, and in dollars and gold, and influence in Washington, D.C., and in business, and in banking, and even in your Protestant church. Now, chapter 25 of this book is entitled The Richest and the Poorest, the Church in America and the Church in Russia. He says, once during a solemn ceremony at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Pope Paul VI took off his tiara, that beehive-looking hat with all the diamonds and rubies and pearls embedded in it. Pope Paul VI took off his tiara and placed it on the altar. Here's what he said. This tiara is a gift to the millions of poor people throughout the world, he explained. The perplexed cardinals approved. The gesture would help to silence the growing criticism about the Roman Catholic Church's wealth. The tiara, however, far from reaching the poor of the world, somehow ended up as a private possession of the ablest ecclesiastical financial wizard of America, Cardinal Francis Spellman. Later, because of protests, the tiara was put on permanent display at the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., where it has been ever since. Cardinal Spellman's act of acquisition, prompted perhaps by a simple romantic impulse, and therefore with no other ulterior motive, nevertheless was interpreted as the epitome of the American Roman Catholic Church, whose principal objective seems to be the relentless pursuance of wealth. Although the last preceding chapters have sufficed to justify this belief, at a risk of repetition, a bird's-eye view of her immense financial massiveness should make any thinking man ponder with even greater earnestness about the impending perils of such a state of affairs. Now, he's talking about what has historically happened when the Roman Catholic Church gained in so much wealth that people rebelled and began to plunder the Roman Catholic Church of her wealth. We've discussed this throughout the book. He's suggesting back in 1983 or 4, the publishing of this book, that the Roman Catholic Church has abused her power and amassed so much wealth that she stands in jeopardy of the same thing happening right here in the United States of America. And here we are, 2011, and Rome is still amassing wealth with both fists. As a matter of fact, she's taking that wealth in compliance with the papal encyclical Caritas in Veritate. And instead of risking that wealth of hostile takeover, as has happened so many times throughout history, she's simply moving it out of this country into third world nations who are glad to take her wealth. Robbing from this rich Protestant nation, she has, through her shrewdness, insider trading, and investment banker tips, has amassed so much wealth that she's now drawn attention to herself, and she's moving her wealth out of this country to protect it. Because the United States is about to be destroyed. That's her goal, and I believe it's rooted in the fear that another Protestant Reformation could occur in this country. She's afraid of what might happen if the American people ever wake up to the truth. And that's why she's taken all of her assets out of the country. It says, not only because her policy is the brassiest stultification of Christ's dictum, quote, my kingdom is not of this world, unquote, but also because her reputation as the greediest church in the world could become the indirect promoter of her potential downfall in a near or distant future. That's right, Rome is afraid that she's going to lose her assets, that this country might rebel and nationalize her assets to help pay the debt that we owe her, $27 trillion. She's moving her assets out. We'll continue the discussion tomorrow. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Inquisition Update on LibertyRadioLive.com.